The stars were burning. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Shield, and watched her fleet die. Her green scales had turned pale from exhaustion. Her yellow eyes, once sharp and proud, now carried the weight of 30 years of war. On the massive before her, warships filled the darkness like a swarm of metal insects. There were thousands of them. Her own fleet had less than 300 ships left. "Admiral, we have lost contact with the Silver Dawn," reported her communications officer, a young female whose voice shook with fear. "The Braveheart is requesting permission to retreat. Their shields are failing." Closed her eyes for a moment. The Silver Dawn had carried 2,000 crew members. Now they were gone, turned to dust and debris in the cold emptiness of space. She had known their captain for 20 years. They had shared meals together. They had laughed together. Now he was dead. "Tell the Braveheart to fall back to defensive position 7, she said quietly, "and send my condolences to the families of the Silver Dawn." They had come to their galaxy 60 years ago. No one knew where they came from or why they wanted to conquer everything they touched. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were completely black, showing no emotion, no mercy. They believed that all other species existed only to serve them. Those who refused were destroyed. Those who surrendered became slaves. The Alliance had fought them from the beginning. 7 different species had joined together to resist the invasion. For 30 years they had held the line. They had won some battles. They had lost many more. Now they were losing the war. Prime was their last major stronghold. If it fell, the Alliance would fall with it. 12 billion civilians lived on the planet below. Families, children, elders who remembered a time before the war. They were all counting on to protect them. She was going to fail them. "Admiral," another officer called out, his voice rising with panic. "We are receiving reports from across the system. Colony stations on the outer moons are being attacked. Supply convoys have been destroyed. They have cut off all escape routes." Nodded slowly. This was the way. They did not just attack. They surrounded, they trapped. They made sure no one could run. Then they crushed their enemies completely. A new signal appeared on the. It was a communication request from the flagship. Knew who was calling. Supreme Warlord, the commander of the forces. He was famous for his cruelty. He was famous for enjoying the suffering of his enemies. "Put him through," said. The screen changed to Show's face. His gray skin was covered with ritual scars. His 4 arms were crossed over his massive chest. His black eyes stared at with something that might have been amusement. "Admiral," said. His voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. "You have fought well. Your species has more courage than most. But this war is over. Surrender now and I will be merciful. Your people will serve the Dominion. They will live. Refuse, and I will burn your world until nothing remains but ash." Wanted to spit at him. She wanted to scream defiance. But she thought of the 12 billion people below. She thought of the children who would die if she refused. "I need time," she said. "I must consult with the Alliance Council." Smiled. It was an ugly expression. "You have 1 hour. Use it wisely." The screen went dark. Turned to her crew. Their faces showed fear, despair, and exhaustion. They had given everything to this war. They had nothing left to give. "Contact the council," she said. "Tell them we need to discuss our options." But she knew there were no options. They could fight and die, or they could surrender and become slaves. Either way, they had lost. The council meeting was held through holographic communication. Leaders from all 7 Alliance species appeared as glowing images on the bridge. They argued. They shouted. Some demanded that they fight to the last ship. Others begged for surrender. A few simply sat in silence, their faces empty of hope. Listened to them all, but her mind was far away. She was thinking about a story her grandmother had told her when she was young. A story about a signal sent into the deepest reaches of space. A cry for help sent to a distant star system called Sol. That signal had been sent over 100 years ago, when the first scouts had appeared in their galaxy. The scientists had detected a planet in the Sol system that showed signs of primitive life. They had sent a message, hoping that someday, somehow, those primitive beings might evolve and come to help. It was a foolish hope. The beings on that distant world had probably been simple animals. They had probably gone extinct long ago. No help was coming from Sol. Admiral, her censor officer, suddenly stood up from his station. His face was strange, showing an expression could not read. "We are detecting something unusual." "What is it?" asked. "A signal from the outer system. It is approaching at high speed. Our computers cannot identify it." The council members fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the sensor display. "Put it on screen," ordered. They showed a map of the star system. Prime was in the center, surrounded by the red dots of ships and the blue dots of Alliance vessels. But now there was a new dot, coming from the direction of deep space. It was moving faster than any ship had ever seen. "Can you identify the vessel?" she asked. The censor officer shook his head. "Negative, Admiral. The ship design does not match any known species. The energy signature is completely unknown." He paused and looked at his screen again. "Wait, I am getting a partial match on the point of origin." "Where is it from?" The officer looked up at her. His eyes were wide. "Sol system, Admiral. The ship is from the Sol system." The bridge went completely silent. Felt her heart stop for a moment. It was impossible. The signal had been sent over 100 years ago. The beings on that world had been primitive. How could they have built a starship? "Are you certain?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral. I have confirmed it 3 times. The vessel originated from the 3rd planet of the Sol system, a world called Earth." Earth had never heard the name before, but somehow it filled her with something she had not felt in years, something she had forgotten existed. Hope. The new dot on the screen grew closer. They were scanning it now, too. She could see their ships turning to face the newcomer. And then the ship arrived. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the battlefield. It was alone, just one ship against thousands. Felt her hope begin to fade. One ship could not save them. One ship could not defeat the armada. But then she looked more closely at the vessel on her screen. It was not large, but it was dense. Its shape was angular and aggressive, completely different from the elegant curves of Alliance ships or the brutal blocks of vessels. It was covered with weapons. So many weapons. Her communications officer spoke up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the vessel. They are identifying themselves." "What do they call themselves?" asked. The officer looked at her with wonder in her eyes. "They call themselves humans, Admiral, and they say they are here to help." Looked at the single human ship facing the massive fleet. It seemed so small, so alone, but something in her heart told her that everything was about to change. They were laughing at the tiny reinforcement. They did not know what was coming. Neither did, but for the first time in 30 years, she believed they might survive. Captain Vance stood on the bridge of the UES Perseverance and looked at the battlefield before her. Her dark eyes moved slowly across taking in every detail. Thousands of enemy ships, a broken and burning fleet of defenders, a planet full of innocent people waiting to be conquered. She had trained her whole life for this moment. "Report," she said calmly. Commander Jackson, her first officer, checked his console. "Enemy count is approximately 4,000 vessels. Alliance forces are down to less than 300. The planet has 12 billion inhabitants." He paused. "The odds are not good, Captain." Vance smiled slightly. "The odds are never good, Commander. That is why they called us." Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. Every person on this ship had been selected and trained for this exact situation. They knew what they were facing. They knew what they had to do. The Perseverance was not like other ships. It was humanity's first true warship, built in secret over decades of preparation. Every piece of technology on board was designed for one purpose: to fight and win against enemies that outnumbered them greatly. The ship was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a weapon, pure and simple. Lieutenant, the communications officer, looked up from her station. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship. They are demanding that we identify ourselves and surrender." "Put it through," Vance said. The change to show a face that made some of the younger crew members step back in surprise. It was the first alien any of them had ever seen in person. His gray skin was marked with scars. His forearms were thick with muscle. His black eyes showed nothing but contempt. "Unknown vessel," the alien said. "I am Supreme Warlord of the Dominion. You have entered a war zone. Identify yourself and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will be destroyed." Vance studied the alien's face. She had seen pictures of them many times during her training. She had read reports of their cruelty, their conquests, their treatment of conquered species. She had watched recordings of planets burning and civilians screaming. She was not impressed. "Supreme Warlord," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I am Captain Vance of the United Earth ship Perseverance. I represent the human race. We received a distress signal from this region of space. We are here to answer it." Laughed, it was an ugly sound. "One ship, you bring one ship to face my armada. Your species is either very brave or very stupid, perhaps both." He leaned forward slightly. "Surrender now, human. I will add your species to our collection. You will serve the Dominion. It is better than death." Vance did not blink. "We do not surrender, we do not run, and we do not lose." For a moment seemed surprised. Then his expression changed to anger. "Then you will die, human, and after I destroy your little ship, I will find you and burn it to ashes." "You can try," Vance said simply. She cut the communication with a gesture. The return to the image of the battlefield. Commander Jackson moved closer to her. "Captain, he is not going to take that well." "I know," Vance replied. "I am counting on it." She turned to face her crew. These men and women had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return home. They had left behind families, friends, and everything they knew. They had crossed the vast emptiness between stars to fight a war for species they had never met. "Listen carefully," Vance said. "For over a century, humanity has known about the... We received that distress signal when our ancestors were still burning coal for energy and riding horses for transportation. We were primitive. We were weak. We could not help." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we did not forget. We did not ignore the cry for help. Instead, we prepared. For generations, we built. We invented. We trained. We studied them from afar and learned everything we could about them. We developed weapons and shields and strategies specifically designed to defeat them." Her eyes moved across the faces of her crew. She saw determination. She saw courage. She saw the spirit that had carried humanity through countless challenges throughout history. "Today, we answer that distress signal. Today, we show the galaxy what humans are capable of. Today, we fight not for conquest or glory, but because innocent people are suffering and we have the power to stop it." She turned back to the all-hands battle stations. "Show them what humans do." The bridge erupted into controlled activity. Officers called out orders. Systems came online. The Perseverance began to move forward directly toward the Armada. On the Alliance flagship, Admiral watched in confusion. "What are they doing?" she asked. "They are flying straight at the enemy. That is suicide." Her tactical officer studied his screens. "Admiral, I am reading very unusual energy signatures from the human vessel. Their power output is impossible. A ship that size should not be able to generate that much energy." "What kind of weapons do they have?" asked. The officer shook his head slowly. "I cannot identify most of them. The technology is completely unknown to our databases. But Admiral, if these readings are correct, he trailed off. What? That single ship has more firepower than our entire remaining fleet. Stared at the human vessel was accelerating, moving faster than any ship of its size should be able to move. They were firing at it now, hundreds of energy beams crossing the darkness of space. The beams hit the human ship. They splashed against its shields like water against rock. The shields did not flicker. They did not weaken. They simply absorbed the attacks as if they were nothing. Impossible, whispered. Supreme Warlord was having similar thoughts on his own bridge. He watched the human ship shrug off weapons fire that should have torn it apart. His officers were shouting reports at him. Nothing was working. Their most powerful weapons were useless against this strange vessel. What are those shields made of? Demanded. Unknown, Warlord. The shield technology does not match anything in our records. It appears to be adapting to our weapons in real time. Every time we hit it, the shields become stronger against that type of attack. Felt something cold touch his spine. He had conquered dozens of species. He had destroyed fleets many times larger than this. He had never seen anything like this. All ships concentrate fire on that vessel, he ordered. Destroy it now. 500 warships turned their weapons on the Perseverance. The space around the human ship turned white with energy beams and explosions. Any normal vessel would have been vaporized instantly. The Perseverance flew through the storm of fire without slowing down. On the human ship, Captain Vance watched the damage reports. Her shields were holding perfectly. The weapons were powerful but primitive compared to what her ship could handle. Enemy vessels are concentrating on our position, Commander Jackson reported. Over 500 ships are now targeting us. Good, Vance said. That means they are not attacking the Alliance fleet. She looked at her weapons officer. Lieutenant Park, are weapons ready? The young officer nodded eagerly. All systems are charged and ready, Captain. Vance allowed herself a small smile. They had ruled this part of the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy who could match them technologically. They had never faced humans. Open fire, she said. The Perseverance came alive with destruction. Fired projectiles at incredible speeds, punching through armor like it was paper. Energy beams sliced through enemy vessels, cutting them in half. Missiles launched by the dozens, each one guided by advanced computers that were smarter than any system. In seconds, 12 warships became expanding clouds of debris. Admiral watched in stunned silence. Her crew had stopped working. Everyone was staring at them with their mouths open. One ship, her tactical officer whispered. One ship is doing this. Nodded slowly. She did not know who these humans were. She did not know where they came from or how they had developed such terrible weapons. But she knew one thing for certain. They had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something they did not understand. And now they were going to pay the price. The battle became a nightmare for the Supreme Warlord stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror, and watched his fleet being torn apart. His 4 hands gripped the railing in front of him so tightly that the metal began to bend. His black eyes were wide with an emotion he had not felt in decades. Fear. The human ship was everywhere at once. It moved through his formation like a predator through a herd of prey animals. Wherever it went, ships died. Its weapons fired constantly, each shot finding its target with terrible accuracy. His captains were screaming for help over the communication channels. Some were screaming as they died. Warlord, we have lost contact with the Destroyer of Worlds, his tactical officer reported. His voice was shaking. The endless hunger has been cut in half. The Fear-Bringer is requesting permission to retreat. Permission, growled. No one retreats. All ships maintain attack formation. That is one ship against thousands. We will overwhelm it through numbers. But even as he spoke, he knew it was not working. The human vessel was not just surviving. It was winning. It chose its targets carefully, destroying the most dangerous ships first. It never stayed in one place long enough to be surrounded. It seemed to know exactly where his ships would be before they moved there. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Captain Vance watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. Everything was going according to plan. Her ship's advanced sensors could track every enemy vessel simultaneously. Her combat computer could predict movements with 97% accuracy. The enemy was doing exactly what she expected them to do. Enemy casualties at 112 vessels, Commander Jackson reported. Our shields are holding at 89%. No damage to critical systems. Time to show them something new, Vance said. She turned to her drone operator. Lieutenant, deploy the swarm. Smiled and pressed a sequence of commands. Swarm deploying now, Captain. Along the sides of the Perseverance, hundreds of small hatches opened. From each hatch emerged a drone, a small autonomous fighting machine about the size of a car. Each drone carried weapons and was controlled by advanced artificial intelligence. They could think for themselves. They could coordinate with each other. They could fight as a single, overwhelming force. 2,000 drones poured into space. They formed into groups and spread out across the battlefield, and then they began to attack. Admiral watched from her damaged flagship, unable to believe what she was seeing. The tiny machines were everywhere. They swarmed around ships like angry insects, finding weak points in armor and shields. They flew into engine exhausts and weapons ports. They attached themselves to hulls and exploded. "What are those things?" her tactical officer asked in amazement. "I do not know," replied, "but they are beautiful." The fleet was falling into chaos. Captains could not coordinate their movements because the drones were disrupting their communications. Ships were crashing into each other while trying to avoid the swarm. Some vessels were trying to flee, but the drones hunted them down. Through it all, the Perseverance continued its work. It targeted command ships and supply vessels. It destroyed this ability to organize and fight back. It was not just attacking the enemy. It was taking apart their entire military structure piece by piece. Watch 3 more of his heavy cruisers explode. His hands were shaking now. He had conquered 100 worlds. He had destroyed civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. He had never lost a battle. He was losing now. "Warlord," his communications officer said, "the human ship is transmitting a message to all ships." "Put it through," said. He needed to know what these humans wanted. He needed to understand them. Captain Vance's face appeared on every screen in both fleets. Her expression was calm and serious. Her dark eyes seemed to look directly at everyone who was watching. "Attention all vessels," she said. "This is Captain Vance of the UES Perseverance. You are engaged in an illegal war of aggression against peaceful species. You have killed billions of innocent people. You have enslaved entire civilizations. Today, that ends." She paused for a moment. "You have 2 choices. Surrender immediately and you will be treated fairly. You will face justice for your crimes, but you will live. Continue fighting and you will be destroyed. There will be no other warnings. Choose now." The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one moved on either side of the battlefield. They were not used to being given ultimatums. They were the conquerors. They gave orders. They did not receive them. Felt rage building inside him. How dare this human threaten him? How dare she speak to the Dominion as if they were criminals? He had ruled through fear and power for his entire life. He would not surrender to a single ship. "All vessels," he shouted. "Full attack on the human ship. Every weapon, every missile, everything we have. Destroy that ship now." The fleet responded. Over 3,000 ships turned toward the Perseverance and opened fire. The space between them filled with enough firepower to destroy a moon. On the human ship, alarms sounded. Commander Jackson looked at his screens with concern. "Captain, they are launching everything at us. This is going to be intense." Vance nodded calmly. Activate Defensive Protocol Omega. Let us show them why we are not afraid. The Perseverance transformed. Hidden panels opened across its hull, revealing additional weapon systems. Its engines flared brighter. Its shields shifted and strengthened. The ship that had seemed powerful before now revealed its true nature. It began to spin slowly, its weapons firing in all directions at once. It created a sphere of destruction around itself, shooting down missiles and energy beams before they could hit. Its drones formed a protective shell around the ship, intercepting attacks and striking back at the enemy. The barrage hit the human ship like a tidal wave of fire, and the Perseverance stood firm. It did not stop. It did not slow down. It kept fighting, kept destroying enemy vessels, kept proving that nothing that did could stop it. Watched with tears forming in her eyes. She had led the Alliance fleet for 15 years. She had watched her people die battle after battle. She had begun to believe that the war could never be won. Now, a single ship from a species they had never met was doing what she had thought was impossible. It was defeating the... Her science officer approached her, his face pale with shock. "Admiral, I have been analyzing the human ship's technology. It is far beyond anything we have ever seen. Their weapons, their shields, their computer systems, they should not exist. They are centuries ahead of anything in the galaxy." "How is that possible?" asked. "They received our distress signal when they were still a primitive species." The science officer shook his head slowly. "I do not know, Admiral, but these humans, they did not just catch up to the rest of the galaxy, they surpassed us, all of us." He looked at where the Perseverance was still carving through the fleet. They had over 100 years to prepare, and they used every moment of it. On the Conqueror's flagship, alarms were screaming. The ship had taken multiple hits. His shields were failing. Half his crew was dead. "Warlord," his tactical officer reported, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "We have lost over 800 ships. The fleet is breaking apart. Many captains are no longer responding to orders." Stared at the human ship was coming directly toward him now. Its weapons were firing constantly. His escort vessels were exploding one by one. There was nowhere to run. For the first time in his life, Supreme Warlord understood what his victims had felt. He understood the terror of facing an enemy that could not be stopped. He understood what it meant to be helpless. Captain Vance watched the flagship on her screen. She could destroy it with a single shot. She could kill and end the war in seconds, but that was not why she had come. "Target their engines and weapon systems," she ordered. "Disable, do not destroy. I want their leaders alive." Commander Jackson looked at her with surprise. "Captain." "They will face justice," Vance said firmly. "Real justice, not revenge. We are not here to become what they are. We are here to end them and show the galaxy that there is a better way." The Perseverance fired precisely aimed shots at the Conqueror. The flagship's weapons went dark. Its engines died. The massive vessel drifted helplessly in space, completely disabled but intact. Across the battlefield, other ships saw what happened. They saw their supreme warlord defeated. They saw their fleet in ruins, and they began to surrender. One by one, vessels stopped fighting and broadcast surrender signals. The weapons' fire faded. The explosions stopped. Silence fell over the battlefield. Admiral stood on her bridge, surrounded by her exhausted crew, and watched the end of a war that had lasted 30 years. One ship, one human ship had done this. She did not know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. The battlefield was quiet now. Where thousands of ships had fought and died just hours ago, there was only debris and silence. Vessels drifted without power, their crews waiting to surrender. Alliance ships moved carefully through the wreckage, rescuing survivors and securing prisoners. And in the middle of it all, the Perseverance stood guard like a protective giant. Captain Vance sat in her command chair and allowed herself a moment of rest. The battle was won. Over 1,000 enemy ships had been destroyed. Nearly 2,000 more had surrendered. The fleet that had threatened to conquer Prime was broken. But the work was not done yet. "Captain," Lieutenant said from her communication station, "we are receiving a transmission from the Alliance flagship. Admiral is requesting to speak with you." Vance straightened in her chair, put her through. The change to show the face of a reptilian alien with green scales and tired yellow eyes looked exhausted but alive. There was wonder in her expression and something else that Vance recognized. Questions. So many questions. "Captain Vance," said, her voice was rough with emotion, "I do not have words to express what I am feeling right now. You have saved my world. You have saved the Alliance. You have ended a war that has killed billions of our people." Vance nodded respectfully. "We came as quickly as we could, Admiral. I am sorry it took so long." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Sorry, you arrived from the other side of the galaxy. You crossed distances that should have taken centuries, and you apologize for being late." She shook her head slowly. "I must ask, Captain, why? Why did you come? Your species has no connection to us. You had never even met us before today. You could have stayed safe in your own system, far from this war. Why risk everything to help strangers?" It was the question Vance had expected, the question she had prepared for her entire career. "Admiral," she said, "my people received your distress signal 123 years ago. At that time, we were still fighting each other over pieces of land on our own planet. We had just learned to fly. We had not even reached our own moon yet." She paused, letting the words sink in. "When our scientists decoded your message, when they learned about thee and what they were doing to the galaxy, they faced a choice. They could ignore the signal. They could tell themselves it was not their problem. They could live their small lives and let the universe take care of itself. But they did not do that," said quietly. "No, they did not." Vance leaned forward slightly. "Instead, they shared the message with the leaders of our world, and our leaders made a decision that would shape the next century of human history. They decided that we would not be the kind of species that ignores suffering. We would not close our eyes and pretend that evil does not exist because it is far away. They decided to help us," said, "even though you were so primitive." "We were primitive," Vance agreed. "We could not help you then. We could not even reach you. So we did the only thing we could do. We prepared. We united our planet under one government for the first time in history. We ended our own wars. We focused all of our energy on developing the technology we would need to cross the stars and fight the—" Commander Jackson, who had been listening quietly, added, "Entire generations grew up knowing that somewhere out there, innocent people were suffering. Our grandparents built the foundations. Our parents built the ships. We were trained from childhood for this mission." Stared at them through her yellow eyes were wet with tears. "You spent 100 years preparing to fight a war for people you had never met. Why?" Vance smiled gently. "Because that is what humans do, Admiral. We cannot stand by while innocent people suffer. It is not in our nature. When we see someone in trouble, we help. When we see evil, we fight it. It does not matter if the victim is a neighbor or a stranger on the other side of the galaxy. Life is precious. Freedom is precious. And we will protect both no matter the cost." On the crippled flagship, Supreme Warlord sat in his command chair surrounded by the bodies of his dead crew. Emergency lights flickered. Smoke filled the air. His ship was broken, just like his fleet, just like everything he had built. He heard sounds at the door to his bridge. Then the door exploded inward, and human soldiers poured through. They were smaller than these humans. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons, but they did not look physically impressive. Had crushed species much larger and stronger. How had these creatures defeated him? One of the soldiers stepped forward and removed her helmet. It was a human female with dark skin and cold eyes. She pointed her weapon at. "Supreme Warlord," she said, "you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You will be taken to face trial. If you resist, we will use force." laughed bitterly. "Trial. I am the supreme warlord of the Dominion. I have conquered 100 worlds. I do not answer to inferior species." The soldier did not react to his insult. "You will answer for the billions you have killed. You will answer for the civilizations you have destroyed. You will answer for every life you have taken or enslaved. And if I refuse, then we will carry you, but you are coming with us either way." Considered fighting. He was strong, stronger than any human. He could probably kill several of them before they brought him down, but he saw something in the soldier's eyes that made him hesitate. There was no fear there, no uncertainty. She had come ready to die if necessary. For the second time that day, felt something he had not felt in decades. Respect. These humans were not afraid of anything. "Very well," he said slowly. "I will come, but you are making a mistake. The Dominion will not accept this defeat. More fleets will come." The soldier shook her head. "Your Dominion is already falling apart, warlord. Word of your defeat is spreading across the galaxy. The species you conquered are rising up. By the time we reach Earth, there will be no Dominion left to save you." She gestured with her weapon. "Now move." Back on the Alliance flagship, Admiral was asking more questions. She wanted to know everything about humanity, their history, their technology, their plans for the future. Captain Vance answered patiently, but there was one question that stood out from all the others. "You have shown us incredible power," said carefully. "More power than any species in the galaxy. You could use that power to rule everything. You could become the new Dominion. Many species would do exactly that. Why do you not?" It was the question that mattered most. The question that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Vance took a moment before answering. "Admiral, my species has a complicated history. We have done terrible things to each other over the centuries. We have had our own tyrants, our own conquerors, our own. We have caused suffering that haunts us to this day." "But you changed," said. "We learned," Vance corrected. "We learned that power used to dominate others always fails eventually. We learned that empires built on fear and cruelty collapse under their own weight. We learned that the only way to build something that lasts is to build it on cooperation, on respect, on shared purpose." She stood and walked closer to the. "We did not cross the stars to become another, Admiral. We came to make sure no one else has to live in fear. We came to offer our friendship, our knowledge, our protection, not as rulers but as partners, not as conquerors but as neighbors." Was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, she bowed her head in the deepest gesture of respect her species knew. "Then the Alliance welcomes you, Captain Vance. The galaxy welcomes you, and I personally thank you for everything you have done." Vance returned the bow. "We are honored to be here, Admiral, and we are just getting started." They could see the first transport ships arriving from Prime. Civilians who had been waiting to die were now cheering. Children who had grown up knowing only war were seeing hope for the first time. Watched them and felt tears running down her scaled face. The humans had come, and nothing would ever be the same again. 1 month had passed since the Battle of Prime. The galaxy had changed more in those 30 days than it had in the previous 30 years. News of the defeat spread from star system to star system like wildfire. Species that had lived in terror for generations learned that the impossible had happened. The unbeatable enemy had been beaten, and they had been beaten by a single ship from a species no one had ever heard of before. The Dominion collapsed faster than anyone expected. Without their military supremacy, the fear that held their empire together disappeared. Conquered worlds rose up against their masters. Slave populations broke free. Governors who had ruled through cruelty found themselves alone and outnumbered. Some fled into deep space, hoping to rebuild somewhere far away. Others surrendered to the Alliance and begged for mercy. A few tried to fight back, but they quickly learned that the humans had not come alone. 5 more Earth ships arrived in the weeks after the battle, each one as powerful as the Perseverance. The remaining resistance did not last long. Supreme Warlord was transported to a neutral world to face trial. He stood before judges from 12 different species and listened as they read the list of his crimes. It took 4 days just to read all the charges. The trial would take months, perhaps years, but the outcome was certain. Would never hurt anyone again. More importantly, he would be an example. The galaxy would see that justice was possible, that even the most powerful tyrant could be held accountable for his actions. Admiral stood on the observation deck of a new space station orbiting Prime. The station had been built by humans and Alliance engineers working together. It was the first joint project between Earth and the Alliance, but it would not be the last. Through the transparent walls of the observation deck, she could see the planet below. 12 billion people lived there. They had been hours away from slavery or death. Now they were free. Children were playing in parks. Families were rebuilding their homes. Businesses were opening again. The war was over, finally truly over. The door behind her opened and Captain Vance walked in. She was not wearing her uniform today. Instead, she wore simple civilian clothes. She looked younger somehow, more relaxed. The weight of battle had lifted from her shoulders. "Admiral," Vance said with a warm smile, "thank you for inviting me." Turned and returned the smile as best as her reptilian face could manage. "Thank you for coming, Captain. I wanted to show you something." She gestured toward the window. Below them, a human transport ship was landing at the main spaceport of Prime. It was not a warship. It carried doctors, teachers, engineers, and supplies. The first wave of human aid workers. "Your people are already helping us rebuild," said. "They ask for nothing in return. They simply want to help." She shook her head slowly. "I still do not fully understand you humans." Vance stood beside her and watched the transport ship land. "What do you not understand?" "You have power, more power than any species we have ever known. You could take whatever you wanted. Instead, you give. You share your technology, you share your medicine, you teach us how to build better ships and grow better food." Turn to face the human captain directly. "Why? What do you gain from this?" Vance thought for a moment before answering. "We gain neighbors, Admiral. We gain friends. We gain a galaxy full of species who trust us and want to work with us." She smiled. "That is worth more than any empire." "But what if we become your enemies someday? What if the species you help decide to turn against you?" "Then we will deal with that when it happens, but we do not believe it will." Vance looked out at the planet below. "Fear creates enemies, Admiral. Kindness creates allies. We would rather live in a galaxy full of friends than a galaxy full of subjects who hate us." Considered this for a long moment. It was such a strange philosophy, such a human philosophy. The had conquered through terror. Other empires throughout history had done the same, but the humans were trying something different, something that seemed almost foolish. And yet it was working. "I have a question," said slowly, "one that I have been afraid to ask." "Ask it." "What happens now with humanity? Will you stay in this part of the galaxy? Will you go back to your own system?" Vance turned to face her fully. "We will stay, Admiral, not as rulers or protectors, but as members of the community. Earth has formally requested to join the Alliance as an equal partner. We want to learn from you as much as we want to teach you." Felt her heart lift. She had hoped for this answer but had not dared to expect it. "The Alliance would be honored to have you, Captain, more than honored." "Good, because we have a lot of work to do," Vance smiled. "The may be defeated, but there are other threats in the galaxy, other species that might try what the Dominion tried. We need to build something stronger, something that can protect everyone." "A new alliance," said, "a larger one. A coalition of all species who want to live in peace. Humans, and everyone else who shares our values. Together, we can make sure that what happened to your people never happens to anyone again." extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Vance took it, and they shook, two leaders from two very different species united by a common purpose. Below them on the planet, life was returning to normal. Markets were opening, schools were teaching, hospitals were healing. The scars of war would take generations to fade, but for the first time in 30 years, there was hope. On other worlds across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Former slaves were tasting freedom for the first time. Devastated cities were being rebuilt. Children who had grown up in fear were learning what it meant to feel safe. And everywhere, people were telling stories about the humans, the strange species from a distant star who had spent a century preparing to save strangers, the warriors who fought with terrible fury but refused to conquer, the people who had more power than anyone and chose to use it to protect the weak. The stories grew with each telling. Some became legends, some became songs. Children played games where they pretended to be human soldiers, brave and strong and kind. In the captain's quarters of the Perseverance, Vance received a message from Earth. It was from her mother, who had worked her entire life building the ships that made this mission possible. "I am so proud of you," the message said. "We all are. 3 generations of our family worked toward this day. Your grandfather designed the first engines. Your grandmother wrote the tactics manuals. I helped build the Perseverance with my own hands, and you got to fly her into battle." Vance read the message with tears in her eyes. "You showed the galaxy what humanity can be," her mother continued. "Not conquerors, not tyrants, but protectors, helpers, friends. That is the greatest victory of all. Come home safe, my daughter, and know that you have made us all so very proud." Vance set down the message and looked out her window at the stars. So many stars, so many worlds, so many species waiting to meet humanity. They had come so far. From primitive beings who could barely reach their own moon to a civilization that had crossed the galaxy to save strangers. It had taken patience, sacrifice, and faith in something larger than themselves. But they had done it. They had proven that power did not have to mean cruelty, that strength did not have to mean domination, that the most powerful force in the universe was not a weapon or a fleet. It was compassion. On a dozen worlds, species who had lived in terror for generations looked up at the stars with new eyes. The humans were out there now. They had joined the great community of spacefaring peoples, and for the first time in a long time, the darkness between the stars did not seem so frightening. Because somewhere out there the humans were watching, waiting, ready to help anyone who needed them. The galaxy had spent thousands of years fearing what lurked in the darkness. They had never imagined that what finally emerged from that darkness would be their salvation. But that was the thing about humans. They had a talent for surprising people. And they were just getting started.